I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call Hot Summer Noir. In a previous collaboration with OnlyFilmNoir, we discussed a block of films revolving around the winter holiday season. This time, we set aside the cold and snowy for the hot and steamy as we hitchhike across the country, all while discussing a few film noirs that take place during the sweltering summer months. When a drifter is hired at a roadside diner, his first order of business is to begin an affair with the boss's wife. The two want to be together, but what to do about her husband? He's the only thing standing between them and happiness, right? The heat gets to Lana Turner and John Garfield in The Postman Always Rings Twice from 1946. George Eastman is given an entry-level position at a factory owned by his extremely wealthy uncle. There he meets a beautiful girl and they really hit it off. That is, until George meets another girl who is wealthier and, well, she's Elizabeth Taylor. George will have to make a difficult decision, but the heat is just making it hard for him to think. Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and the magnificent Shelley Winters all star in A Place in the Sun from 1951. Ned Racine is Florida's top shyster lawyer and ladies' man who meets and ultimately lusts after the beautiful Maddie Walker during a blistering hot summer. Again, the only thing standing between them and their happiness is Maddie's husband. So, do they get him out of the way? What about all his money? William Hurt and Kathleen Turner star in 1981's Body Heat. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
In New York City, 7 persons are reported as having succumbed over the weekend from the high temperature still prevailing.
Too hot to eat. Funny climate you got around here. The hotter the wind blows, the hotter it gets.
Yeah, we call that wind the Sandiana. It comes from the desert.
When it gets hot, people try to kill each other. People dress different, feel different, they sweat more, wake up cranky, and never recover. Pretty soon, people think the old rules are not in effect.
All right, welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me, as always, is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Brian, look, a hooker cut to look like Lana Turner is still a hooker. She just looks like Lana Turner. Wait, what movie are we watching today?
What line was that from?
LA Confidential.
Yeah, I was like, that's interesting. We are not talking about LA Confidential today, but I was like, wait a second. Well, today, very special.
We didn't have Lana Turner, so that's good.
No, there's the reference. Today we're talking about a Lana Turner film.
Yeah.
A very special episode today with a very special returning guest. Jeremy, please do the introduction.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. This is kind of a spiritual sequel to our Christmas Noir episode. And who better to have back than the guy who runs the best film noir account online, OnlyFilmNoir, Alex Vlahov.
Hey, thank you so much. So good to be back.
Welcome back.
You guys are great. Really, really good to be back here. Thank you. So it's like the polar opposite in terms of theme, right? Just like it's a good counterbalance to the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was asking Jeremy if you had any fall and Halloween ideas too, because maybe we just need to make this a holiday seasonal thing.
I actually thought about that. I was like, do I do when spring rolled around? I was thinking, are there springtime noirs? And I thought that's just such a weird. That's almost like when TCM runs out of categories. You know what I mean? At some point you get too esoteric with it. You know what I mean?
No, but I think this one is what the more appropriate, or the more obvious film noir category, or a subcategory where it's like, okay, it's hot and things are gonna happen when it's hot, but. You didn't see it coming with the Christmas, but I think with this one, you see it coming.
Yeah, so today's block are hot, steamy summer noirs. I probably added a few too many adjectives in there. But this is a summer noir block, and quite a heavy-hitting block we have today. The Postman Always Rings Twice from 1946, A Place in the Sun from 1951, and Body Heat from 1981. I mean, 3 completely different eras of movie here, but all fit so well together in this together. It would be great to watch these all in a theater in a triple feature. This is one of those that I would just go out
A theater with
applauding.
broken air conditioning?
Yeah, exactly. You have to do that. Steamy.
And it's so funny because it's so antithetical to the idea of noir, the idea of sunshine, open spaces, breezy ocean sides. Usually people think of noir, they think of just the word itself, right? But also dark sort of urban settings. And what I love about all three of these movies, they're kind of all about opportunistic, cocky drifters. If even with Body Heat, I mean, they're kind of planted, but they all have to do with sort of an aimless, wandering dude who gets in over his head. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But thank you guys so much for having me back. It's really cool to talk about summer noir.
Totally. Yeah, or I guess with Body Heat, it's the drifter and the femme fatale are the one and the same.
Oh,
And so Body Heat has the femme fatale, right? And so does Postman. Place in the Sun weirdly doesn't, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of
Right.
It's sort of more on the melodrama than on the noir barometer, though there's definitely people would classify it as a noir. I mean, the classifications are silly, but yeah, it's weird. Place in the Sun is the one that really doesn't have the femme fatale character.
it's hard to watch these movies if you have any sort of sympathy for characters because everyone gets fucked at some point. Like Nick, he just gets screwed really bad. Alice gets screwed really bad, and it's just one of those things that are just, and I guess technically so does Ned. Ned Racine also gets screwed pretty bad at the end of Body Heat. But man, these were great.
I'm glad you liked them. Yeah, were these all? I know that I think Jeremy, you had some familiarity with some of these. Were these all rewatches for y'all, or?
For me, I hadn't seen A Place in the Sun, but Body Heat and Postman, I've seen a couple of times each. So
this was second time for. I mean, I think third time for Postman, second time for Body Heat, and second time Place in the Sun for me. So early rewatches. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where to start here. It's like I think Postman Always Rings Twice is an interesting one. It's okay. This is the first time it's adapted to film. It's the 46 version. They did it again in the 80s with Jack Nicholson and Jessica Lange, and Bob Rafelson was the director, the guy who did 5 Easy Pieces and produced all those crazy movies like Last Picture Show and.
Feels like a different tone for that one too. I watched the trailer for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Easy Rider, he produced that too. Jeez. Okay. So some movies that you just don't associate with the film noir. Which I guess when we get to our last one, maybe you wouldn't associate the writer of Empire Strikes Back or Raiders of the Lost Ark with a film noir, but slam dunk on that one too.
Technically, also George Lucas. George Lucas apparently shadow directed this effort.
He was definitely one of the producers. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I don't know about the directing part. But.
I think that was one of the deals that the studio made with him, that he'd watch Larry Kasdan direct this film because it was his first film, just to make sure he would stay on
Kasdan
budget
dropped
and time.
The ball,
exactly.
He'd have to step in. Type of thing.
George Lucas would then direct Body Heat.
He vouched for him. Apparently, he vouched for him and was executive as an uncredited executive producer. But you hear that a lot about Lucas at this time. I mean, apparently this is sort of famous film trivia lore, but I guess that Godfather montage of right before Michael goes to Italy, the newspaper sequence, apparently Lucas directed that montage. So he would occasionally do some pitch hitting, it seems, for someone that
he was an editor. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where he kind of came up through all this, didn't he? First as an editor. I think he helped out with a lot of these types of projects like Coppola and all that.
I mean, thank God he did with this because it is such a strong film and such an unlikely turn after something like Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
Such an unexpected sort of and the cast. You got Mickey
Ted Danson playing his best Mo Green impression.
Yeah, totally. And Mickey Rourke.
You don't talk to a guy like Mo Green like that.
I'm Mo Green.
This is my town.
So many little things, and the fedora hat. It's as a gift. It's very. One thing I do have a complaint about is the flute. The flute in the soundtrack hasn't aged well. 80s movies with flute in the soundtrack. It's like the saxophone. There's a lot of commentary on 80s sax and comedies, but the melodramatic flute. There's something about the soundtrack in this one that it's a great score. It just hasn't aged as well as the rest of the picture, in my humble opinion.
I gotta say though, the sax blasting when William Hurt breaks through that door and that famous scene of him just grabbing her and kissing her and like that music just swelling up. I thought that was pretty powerful.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Right. That first exchange, that on the sort of boardwalk, when that line to line, my husband's out of town. He's my favorite kind. He only comes in on weekends. I'm liking him better all the time. It just, and then ending with the spilt ice cream. You don't want to lick it. It's like one of the best exchanges of dialogue because you immediately understand who they are, what their relationship is to each other in terms of class, and also where they are. It's just a hot place. There's so much wrapped up there. It's perfect.
And it's Florida, right? A heat wave through Florida at this time. I think that's where they're at. Yeah.
Edited by Carol Littleton, who did E.T. and The Big Chill. She's great.
Yeah. Apparently, she worked that was their first collaboration, and then she worked with Kasdan. For 25 years or whatever.
There you go.
Incredible.
But yeah, you brought up an interesting point about like the melodrama, like the sound of the melodrama in Body Heat. I think in these other two films, it's also closer to what you would associate as a melodrama. It's like, and when they were making them at the time, they'd be thinking of them as melodramas. I can't remember if in our Christmas episode if we talked about this, but like part of like film noir was this idea that there were melodramas. There were stories about regular people, as opposed to big and important people, and that differentiates Shakespeare from the melodrama tradition. And in these ones, you really kind of feel some of that class presence, and pretty much, and actually all of these films. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. Like Postman Always Rings Twice, it was produced in '46, and it must have been part of the reason it probably got made was because of the success of Double Indemnity in '44. Postman Always Rings Twice, the book, was written first, and then Double Indemnity second, even though they're pretty much the same storyline.
Interesting.
But Double Indemnity is like kind of the more refined second draft. And the film too, it's like it's even more refined in terms of, it's like Billy Wilder and Raymond Chandler helped write the screenplay, and it's like all these things for the Double Indemnity movie. And you can kind of see how he was able to take some of the things that happened in Postman, James M. Cain that is, and dial them up a notch in Double Indemnity.
Sounds like the book was quite a controversial book when it came out, though.
Yeah.
Banned in certain areas.
You're right. And the relationship that Frank and Cora have in the book is, I read it years ago, so it's not totally top of mind, but I remember like their very first interaction was he comes up and like
bites
that
her lip.
Kiss, he like bites her lip, and
yeah.
like it's like bleeding, and like there's this like sadomasochistic violence to their relationship that's not really in the movie.
In the 40s. Not going to go over well with critics.
Well, and the book was in like the 30s.
There you go, right?
34,
not going to go over well.
So the book was the 30s. There is a French version that is not really talked about from 1939. It's called The Last Turning, but in terms of Hollywood, it took a long...
like an adaptation?
Yeah. There is a French version, but it took a long time in the 40s. But you're right, until Double Indemnity. And then Mildred Pierce, also by McCain, got greenlit for a 45 release. And that was, I have here, Warner Brothers. So those two things combined, Double Indemnity, Mildred Pierce going into production, that kind of led to Postman getting the green light. But it was very risque material. And it's interesting, but it does feel like a first draft. It feels a lot more scrappy than Double Indemnity. I almost like it more, I think, than Double Indemnity, only because it feels so much more nasty and cynical. I love Double Indemnity, but there's the outdoor dusty sort of like porch swing restaurant. Really, something appeals to me about this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true. I guess I wasn't saying that as it was somehow worse or whatever. I just like it is interesting
no.
similar
Didn't
the
take that.
plots are. Yeah.
But the timing of it is really also another point you were making, right? Because book comes out, then Double Indemnity, then the Postman comes out, right?
Yeah, so it's like the book of Postman, the book of Double Indemnity, then the movie of Double Indemnity, then the Postman movie. The one last thing I want to say about that was, like, you brought up Mildred Pierce.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the movie Mildred Pierce, Michael Curtiz directed it, and they really turned it into a film noir. But I read the book, like, expecting that same sort of, like, plot line, and there's a lot of similarities, but it's just a straight melodrama. Like, that they don't have the sort of, like, same sort of murder intrigue and all these things, which is really interesting because you could see that melodrama film noir connection really laid out pretty interestingly in the Mildred Pierce book versus Mildred Pierce movie.
One of the things, well, I mean, Mildred Pierce, I guess if you're using like pure definitions, it is considered film noir for various elements. I mean, the femme fatale daughter, right, being part of sort of the DNA. Postman is like one of the ultimate femme fatale roles. I mean, Cora is like dressed in white to contrast her intentions. It's brilliant costume design.
Until the end, when she's
Until
in
the
all
end.
black.
Yep,
right?
It changes. And I don't know if this was touched on last time. One thing that I kind of heard on a different podcast, it's run by the Pure Cinema podcast guys. One of them commented that the idea of the femme fatale was like this post-war idea that came out of suspicion of one's wife or girlfriend while you were away at war, right? So suddenly you have all these veterans.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting? It was like this like generational...
Or kind of like an insecurity about, how whatever women were in the workplace.
Yes.
During the war effort.
Being the sudden autonomy that women had, men weren't used to it. Society wasn't used to it. So even other women, older generations, perhaps most arguably, would be very suspicious of this newfound freedom. So it was very easy to throw the role of villainy and of casting aside in society at this time. It was very, very common for this to be found in films, and that's why the femme fatale role developed in film. I mean, this is sort of a pop psychology post-rear view mirror armchair view of it. I like it. I'd like it as an explanation. I mean, misogyny is a thing. It totally explains it. And it's weird because then people are like, well, it sucks that women are always the villains. But then you hear actresses saying that, like, some of the best roles I had in that era were these, like, femme fatale roles. I mean, Lana Turner said that Cora was her favorite role. And, her life had drama in itself with her daughter stabbing the gangster in the 50s, Johnny Stompanato. Yeah. So, I mean,
right, in real life.
That's just, going down a barrel of her life. I mean, but yeah, it provided opportunities for dialogue and for character and complexity that many actresses at the time would not have been able to access because of this weird, like, archetype that was a result of the war. It's so fascinating to me how that happened.
Well, and also, I mean, like, you're right, like, there is something interesting about the Cora character that's not as interesting as the Elizabeth Taylor character in the next movie, Place in the Sun, precisely because she has more dimension and autonomy. But anyhow, what I found so fascinating watching Postman this time was, like, how influential it seemed to have been on Psycho, on, like, the Bates Motel. And that whole, like, setup they had over there, there's so many, like, little shots. Exactly, like they had that little highway there, and then they talked about later the highway might be going somewhere else, and Nick was going to sell the place.
Oh, that conversation! I want to talk about that conversation in a second, where he reveals what the plans are. But please keep going. I'm loving
Canada?
This. Yeah. It's almost like a sketch, but I'm loving this.
It does feel funny. Yeah.
I'm loving this Psycho line though. The parallels. I'm loving the parallels.
Yeah, well, and then there was that moment where they were planning the murder, and John Garfield's outside having a smoke, and he's looking up at the bay window, and it's lit up there. And then there was another moment in a bay window where there was just a silhouette in the window. There were just, like, so many moments that, like, you just later saw in Psycho. Again, not to mention just, like, the fact that there was this, bed and breakfast, little, I guess it wasn't. Was it a motel? They didn't have anybody stay there.
It was a restaurant.
But it was
the only person that lived there was Frank, because Nick let him live there.
Yeah.
I got the idea that it might have been a boarding house if one asked, but normally it was more of a cafe. And another thing, Psycho and this film both end in prison, in the courthouse.
Yeah.
I mean, Psycho has that famously detested final scene where they're like, well, here's the entire movie. And this sort of does it in a much more... I mean, when they bring in Hume Cronin, an actor, by the way, whom I love.
I was a big Cocoon fan growing up.
He is one of the best actors of this golden era, as far as I'm concerned. Anything he's in, he has this
Shadow of a Doubt.
He's excellent in this.
Oh, I think Shadow of a Doubt. Yeah, I mean, he purrs. I'm a big Hume Cronin fan. He's someone I wish was talking
Parallax View. He was a good one on that one.
And life partner of Jessica Tandy. I mean, I think they even would appear in films together. I haven't seen many.
They acted together. Yeah.
A lot of lighthearted comedies. I admit, like in terms of like my viewing, I'm missing a lot of of the classic comedies. Anyways, the trial stuff works for me. Whereas, not to jump, Place in the Sun doesn't really work. All the courtroom stuff, it kind of lags for me in the third act. Whereas
even with Perry Mason?
Even a little bit with Perry Mason, I gotta be honest, Yeah, which is such a funny that he's in that. And then
I was like, you're setting up yourself for a longer career in TV there.
Literally, yeah.
Right.
I love his cane though. You get all pissed off in the court and just bang his cane around.
Yeah. But Jeremy, to talk to your point about that exact conversation that you bring up in the Psycho parallels. So when he says they're moving to Canada, okay, it's okay. Here's the thing. Here's the good news. All right, imagine this just as fuck. This is fucking crazy. He's laying on her. We're moving to Canada, the far north, the most northern rural region of the continent. And what are you going to be doing? You're caring for my sister because she needs a woman's touch. It's just like for Cora.
He sealed his doom right there, I'd say.
Exactly, 100%. He's like underselling how bad this. It's so funny to me how it unspools out. I love that. So he plays it very well. Yeah.
Man, he was funny when he would get drunk. Those were some of the best scenes in the movie, I think.
Playing music.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I love, not to do a spoiler, this is just a tiny artistic moment.
Spoiler.
But when he's finally done in, how his echo lives on past him in the valley,
yes.
They're like experimenting with the echo.
Good call.
And then he says something, right. He's hit, lights out, and he still lives on for a brief second in an echo, and then he's gone forever. Yeah. I mean, that's such a weird little poetical moment for a 1946 crime genre film. By the way, this director didn't do too much Tay Garnett. This is really the thing I really know him for from his filmography.
I had to look up after watching this. I was a little confused on how Cora was going to kill Nick. She was handed, a bag of ball bearings, and then she was going up to hit him in the head. Is what I read later was that she was just going to sock him in the head with this bag of ball bearings and then make it seem like he fell in the tub, older guy, fell in the tub and killed himself or died. But I'm thinking how this would work out, and I thought that she was going to try to do like a marble thing and throw him on the ground, and he would kind of slip like a cartoon, And I was like, how the hell are they supposed to do this? I mean, I guess it would have made for some good comedy and a little lighthearted approach, but
yeah.
The slapstick.
Yeah, exactly.
Back to the legal system. It's funny, in Place in the Sun, I don't know, maybe the scenes were boring for you, but at least it resembled our something like our court system. Here, they had no jury at any point. The judge was just doing everything. It was you remember like Hume Cronin brings up oh no, we're not doing guilty anymore, and then the DA is like, whoa, what? And he's like, Your Honor, this is going to embarrass me. And it's like, okay, forget it then. It's it's total kangaroo shit.
It was like they were in divorce court. It was just a conversation.
It was just people's court. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they were in people's court. I want to go back to Hume Cronin real quick because you brought him up, and I definitely have some highlighted notes here from him because I agree, he was awesome. First of all, the way he lights up a cigar at the beginning. Everyone else is smoking cigarettes. This motherfucker pulls out a cigar and starts lighting that thing up.
Which also, real quick, like parallels that moment in Body Heat where it's like, hey, does anybody mind if I smoke real quick?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was
Bust
just
out
going to
some
say.
Robustos, and you're like, what
Exactly.
Oh, sorry, were you about to bring...
No. That's exactly what it was. It was like I feel like there was a ton taken from Postman for Body Heat. Specifically, I'm sorry, that's a side note. Let me just get back real quick. I thought it was really interesting the defense that Hume Cronin used, and he kind of tricked them into this fake confession to the detective, but he was just his dude that works for him, his gumshoe guy, as he calls him.
Oh,
which
right.
What a name for a film noir, right? A gumshoe guy. Like, I think that works great.
James Gandolfini. I like to call that actor James Gandolfini because it's basically James Gandolfini. If he was like, if this was the '90s, that's who that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. But yeah, I just thought that there was a lot of cool stuff. But I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Jeremy, that this wasn't probably the most accurate legal proceedings in portrayed on film. It was probably a little bit off, and sensationalized a bit.
Like specifically the courtroom, like just rang false a couple times. I mean, I thought that was like a really good reveal that having the stenographer be just like one of the guys who works for the defense. Yeah. And by the way, that guy, his character's name was Kennedy. When John Garfield was beating the shit out of him, like he got so bloody, which for a 1940s movie,
all over
was
his
shocking.
face.
It was like normally you get socked and you just kind of pass out and there's bloodless fall. In this one, it was like blood was smearing all over his cheeks and mouth.
Wait, do you mean when he does the slap, 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 slap?
Yeah, exactly. It was like the high-speed E Honda punch from Street Fighter.
When he slaps James Gandolfini. That's oh, love it. We got to talk about Audrey Totter, who had she's the one that
short role, right?
Yeah. Well,
are you talking about thin skirt, hot seat?
Yes,
exactly.
Oh my god! For a 1940s audience, that must have been the most thrilling thing they had ever heard. So suggestive.
No, but it reminded me, a little bit of the Body Heat, the first Body Heat exchange.
Yes.
And
exactly.
It was just as suggestive,
Yes, and this is Audrey Totter's first, I think her first film noir role, because she would pop up in the famous, awful but experimental but kind of cool Lady in the Lake, and then Tension.
Oh, yes, right.
She's great. A Lady in the Lake, she's famous. There's a bunch of GIFs of her doing facial reactions. I mean, she's fantastic in the film. Tension, she's great in too.
That movie is like playing a first-person video game where it's
it's like playing a first-person video game if you make the most boring choices. It's like you just talk to people. It's like
Is it all first-person perspective? Or?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, interesting. That very experimental then for the time.
There's another noir that does it slightly better, but only for the first third of the film. It's Dark Passage. The one where Humphrey Bogart, that begins with first person, but then they change it up, and that's just
where he gets plastic surgery to look like Bogey.
Exactly, yeah. But we digress.
That's a Tales from the Crypt episode.
Yeah,
that is totally a Tales from the Crypt episode. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Anyway, sorry. So Audrey Totter.
Oh, she's just fantastic. I love Audrey Totter. I love her in Lady in the Lake. I love her in Tension. I love her in this, and apparently she had a much longer scene where she is training cats. Not a joke. She's apparently a cat trainer,
just to set her up for her character, or
a circus type cat trainer. And apparently the test screenings.
Oh, large cats, like lions.
I think so. Actually, reading.
It's not the cat that gets electrocuted, like
No,
Christmas Vacation style.
I love that. I love that.
Or did she train the cat to do that? Get up.
Plot
She
twist.
was working with him the whole time. That'd be a great twist.
That would be an amazing plot twist. She trained the fucking cat.
That's
oh
awesome.
my god!
Get up there.
Apparently, test audiences hated the Audrey Totter cat training scene, so they cut it out. And James, there's a story about that. James M. Cain was at one of those test screenings, and he snuck out to avoid talking to the producers afterwards because he was so embarrassed.
I mean, I didn't miss it. I didn't miss that scene.
Yeah. Very brief. But
How
she's
much
great.
did the swimming scene remind you of Gattaca?
Interesting.
You know what I mean? Where she's like goes all the way out, and she's like, "Well, you can just let me go, or bring me back, or whatever." Right? And it's like they did a very similar gag in Gattaca.
Filmed in Laguna Beach. Apparently, it was freezing. Totally free and foggy. It wasn't supposed to be foggy that day, but it was. It ruined filming. And another thing, parallel to Place in the Sun, they've shot in Lake Tahoe for those lake scenes. October, again, freezing, and then Body Heat too. Yeah. Body Heat too, freezing. Yeah. All of these are filmed in summertime, outdoors, but like production was actually done in like awful weather for the actors.
They said that the William Hurt and Kathleen Turner, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
they had to like eat ice cubes before speaking on screens to like.
So there's no like breath. Yeah, exactly.
And they all look
so
sweaty throughout that whole movie. I'm like, they gotta be hot, right? This totally sells. And then that like misty POV that they've got on the camera, or the lens on the camera.
Everything was like, just covered in fog or whatever. It's like the fog machine was just working overtime to like make it look like steamy and hot. And it was like, it turns out it was freezing cold.
That's so funny.
A couple other quick connections on Postman. Like, one, I watched The Man Who Wasn't There, the Coen Brothers movie. Pretty recently. I totally forgot how much the Coens ripped Postman Always Rings Twice off for that movie. Like, I mean, everything from, the main character, having to ride the lightning for the wrong murder, but like, he was sort of cosmically guilty, but not guilty of the one that was convicted of. The Hume Cronin character in Man Who Wasn't There was played by, Monk. What's his name?
Tony Shalhoub.
Tony Shalhoub, thank you. Yes, and he brilliant performance in that.
I haven't seen it. Is that Billy Bob Thornton? Is that one?
Billy Bob Thornton,
Gandolfini,
Frances McDormand,
Gandolfini's in it.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Of course, Frances McDormand's in it.
Tony Shalhoub, handful of other Coen Brothers stock company players in there as well. But anyway, definitely check it out. And one last quick thing is like, and this kind of like maybe touches on some of the other movies, but I think this is because it was the first one in our sort of series. I wanted to bring it up here, which is like they talk about this moment where they talk about the sort of hot wind, and it's like you have a funny climate here. The harder the wind blows, the hotter it gets. And he's like, yeah, that's what we call the Santa Annie. It comes from the desert. Yes. And it's like, that is ripped part and parcel right out of Raymond Chandler's Red Wind. Like that opening, like 3 lines of Red Wind is exactly about the effects that the hot Santa Ana winds have on people and how they drive them crazy. And if you're not familiar with that quote, I'll read it real quick, which is the very beginning of the story is, there was a desert wind blowing that night. It was one of those hot, dry Santa Anas that come down through the mountain passes and curl your hair and make your nerves jump and your skin itch. On nights like that, every booze party ends in a fight. Meek little housewives find the edge of a carving knife and study their husbands' necks. Anything can happen. And it's like, that is essentially the sort of like thesis statement for sort of all 3 of these movies, I think. It's like,
certainly.
Jeremy, the hairs are standing up on my arm. Okay.
Is it because of the Santa Ana wind?
It is the Santa Ana winds. Because this Christmas, we watched The Holiday from 2006 starring Jack Black, Kate Winslet, Cameron Diaz, and Jude Law. There is a scene where Jack Black says, "The wind. It's what makes it so warm at this time of year. Legend has it, when Santa Anas blow, all bets are off. Anything can happen."
Yeah.
The Holiday steals from Raymond Chandler.
There you
Folks, this is a Grindhouse Institute breaking news exclusive scoop. We have put it together because it is one of her favorite movies. So she's seen The Holiday Minute. She like owns it on streaming. And I finally watched it. It's fun, enjoyable movie. The house, she loves it so much. We went to the house where that scene was filmed. She took a picture in front of it. It was across the street from the Huntington Library. It was really easy. But long story short,
wow. Okay.
they have a conversation of, the Santa Ana wins. Kate Winslet's here from England. Like the Santa Anas. And he's like, anything can happen. All bets are off. Dude,
Right.
I did not know they were stealing from Raymond Chandler.
Yeah, like almost word for word. Right?
They were cribbing. That writer's cribbing from Raymond Chandler, and this pops up in Postman Always Rings Twice. I'm loving this convo. This is bringing it into like in jokes with my girlfriend around Christmas time. I love it. It's great. Good
Isn't that
stuff.
also part of William Hurt's opening monologue in Body Heat? Doesn't he mention that the heat can make you crazy and etc.?
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it.
And I know it's not the Santa Anas; it's just the heat he refers to. But I see the connection there.
It creates the motivation for taking things too far. I wouldn't have done it if not for that heat.
Oh yeah, I mean, Body Heat's almost shameless because he's literally looking at like a burning fire, and it's like that's a metaphor for everything that's going to happen. And eventually, he's like blamed sort of for that, so it's like he's looped into that.
Right.
Just before we jump from Postman, Lana Turner, the only co-star John Garfield ever became romantically involved with, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, really sad story with John Garfield. His heart attack in 1951. Like this was Hollywood, which is like a great account. This was Hollywood. That she had a book recently covers John Garfield and all his problems against the HUAC hearings.
HUAC,
yeah. And I think
he's only 39 too when he passed away.
So, and that's why he's not really talked about, I think, these days, because he didn't live on to that.
But he's the precursor to everybody, right? Brando and like all these
100%
leading actors. Yeah,
100%. And the last thing I think is interesting about this film is that how people start coming to the restaurant more after the trial. It shows that people have been into true crime forever. You know what I mean? Like, these are literally like these are last podcasts on the left.
They're
listeners.
bloggers. Yeah, that's what I was saying. They're like full of bloggers now. Yeah.
There's
a murder here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
They would have all had podcasts. All those restaurant
Exactly.
visitors before
God.
I say that with all due respect because movie podcasts are one thing. No. I'm not trying to. I'm saying because true crime podcasts. No, it's true crime podcasts are a very distinct flavor of individuals.
Totally. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a specific genre.
This is a fake crime podcast. So it's different.
I guess some of the movies might be based on real crime, though.
Place in the
I guess this was based on a real crime, right? This was based on.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Actually, both the first two movies were based on sort of real crime.
Postman was? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just like with Double. There was some case, the 1927 case of Ruth Snyder.
Interesting.
And it also was sort of the inspiration for Double Indemnity because I think in that Ruth Snyder thing, she took out a double indemnity clause or whatever. But anyway, it's like, since James M. Cain wrote the book twice, he wrote it as Postman and then he wrote it as Double Indemnity. He kind of used that same inspiration on both of them.
Gotcha. Brilliant. I had no idea it was based on a real event.
A Place in the Sun is based on a fellow named Chester Gillette. Yep. And it was in a similar situation to this, but he was also he was also riding the lightning by the end of his career.
I believe it was a lake in upstate New York, and it's supposed to be haunted to this day, the ghost of Grace Brown.
Let's get some podcasters up there, the haunted podcasts. They need to go have lunch and a picnic up there and see the ghosts.
Well, speaking of Place in the Sun and like the true crime inspiration there, do you have any background on that real crime?
Well, Brian, you touched on the name Chester Gillette, murdered Grace Brown, 1906. He was executed, rode the lightning in 1908. She haunts the lake, and that inspired the Dreiser novel American Tragedy. Just awful title. I mean, I get that at the time, but an American Tragedy. Just it's hard to Google. You can't Google it. Hard to Google that title. I mean, 1925. They're probably not thinking about that, but I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah. Why weren't they thinking about that? That's weird.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
What the fuck is a Google?
Yeah. Don't name the movie On the Waterfront. Hard to find. It's just hard to find in searches. Okay, so this movie was a huge hit. Multiple Oscars, big box office returns.
First ever Golden Globe
For Best Picture. Charlie Chaplin said the greatest American film ever made. Some people, it has gone in and out of favor. It seems to have had a period critically when it was like not very popular, when it was sort of considered stodgy. I don't know where we are right now. I love it. I love A Place in the Sun.
I thought it was great.
I'm glad. What did you guys like about it? I'm so glad you guys saw this the first time.
I think you hit it. First of all, this didn't fit within the femme fatale and like the format of the other films we watched today or talking about today. This was a totally different type of story, and I thought that was very interesting. But it kind of reminded me of Cousin Greg from Succession. If you guys watch Succession, he's the nephew of Hirsch or whatever the hell the guy's name is that runs the magazine.
Patriarchal billionaire. That
exactly. Yeah, it's his nephew. Yeah. So he's the same kind of situation where he's like kind of an outsider, still family, gets a shot in this like entry level position at the company, and it kind of goes through this whole thing. And I really like to see how they move George Eastman from getting reacquainted with his family, getting that entry-level position, and then meeting, this woman that he thinks he's in love with, but then he sees like what's out there, what he could really achieve, right? But even with his name, I think he wants to achieve that, and I thought that was just an interesting flow, story.
That's true. I think between Postman and Place in the Sun, there's just like so many similarities, both based on sort of true stories, both about, this sort of lower class person, trying to climb and claw and fight their way into, more wealth.
Hitchhiking. Both begin with hitchhiking.
Hitchhiking, the death that they get sort of blamed for in the end, and there's always like really interesting things that like connect them. And I was kind of worried that Body Heat not being able to fit in here, but it's funny, like, in all three of these, like the sort of the main guy who ends up in jail and accused of murder and all these other things is sort of just driven and totally motivated by and drunk with lust in all three of these movies, and I think in that sense, like all three of them kind of tied together like a lot better than I originally thought they were going to.
I completely agree. When you said, I do not, only because of time period and the fact that it's in color. Body Heat is not an anomaly with these two because, man, all three, the main protagonist guy, whatever you want to call, the sap, the poor sap, is fucked. Is fucked. Sent to die or sent to a life in prison.
Yeah.
It's it's a very, very good through line between the three. Place in the Sun, Angela Vickers, right? Elizabeth Taylor. Is this the worst hot girl summer that Angela Vickers has ever had? Honest question, right? Because this is a pretty bad. This is a bad summer.
Pretty bad summer.
Yeah. And what I love about her, which is also I think is something kind of ineffable that you actually find in fiction, and sometimes even in like high school in real life, there's something about the uber attractive human being that is able to cut through the bullshit because of the way people treat them. They almost see people at their most base reactions. You know what I mean? So like there's almost like a laser skepticism of adulthood. And I would see that sometimes, I think, in like very attractive friends. I really hope I'm not projecting this, but like I sometimes, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's not there at all. But like I do think that there is like this ability, this like crystal clear, whether she knows it or not, that Elizabeth Taylor has, and that I think sometimes privileged youth has, to see through bullshit. And also clouded by bullshit, but able to speak very bluntly and plainly in a way that their status and looks afford them to. Because like she's like,
everything in their life is about flattering them, especially with this Elizabeth Taylor character. Yeah.
Well, I mean, whether it's class or whatever their experience is, she is able to just like say like, she sees him playing pool alone. She's like, are you being exclusive? Are you being dramatic? And then she says to him, you seem so strange, I mean, yeah, he's he hitchhiked with a note from his uncle and comes from like a super religious background. He has no small talk. He's a weird dude, right?
Yeah.
So she calls it like it is immediately. And I feel like that's something that's not talked enough about with these sort of like, I mean, I hate to use a stupid term, but these like cliche hot girl characters, which I guess she might have been, but I feel like there's so much more about those characters and so much more about her in this. She was the only one not nominated. She was like 18. Not nominated. Monty Clift. I say that like I'm like fucking like...
You're buddies with him, yeah.
Exactly, my buddy. Like I'm like, some like...
Good old
veteran.
Monty.
You fist bump him when you see him?
I do. Montgomery Clift and Shelley Winters were nominated. She wasn't. So I'll stop going on about... She has this weird sensibility that you almost find in real life among these super attractive... well-heeled. It's not that it's even a good thing, but she has it, and it seems very true to life. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, because you imagine that in a film noir setting with Elizabeth Taylor, especially the way her character is introduced, one would expect her to be playing that role of the film femme fatale. Of like, just manipulating, poor Montgomery Clift. He had no idea what was coming to him, right? You kind of expected that to play out. Now, I think because that didn't happen, it kind of like falls more onto the melodrama, side of the scale rather than film noir. If you're talking about the balance between the two. But how amazing was Shelley Winters in this? I mean, I think this is probably the youngest I had seen her. I mean, she of course was in Lolita and later in life like Poseidon Adventure and stuff like that, Night of the Hunter. But like apparently early on in Shelley's career, she was sort of being groomed to be the sort of bombshell or the object of the lust of the audience and everything else. And she played sort of against type in this, whereas maybe a year previous, the studio heads would have had her play the Elizabeth Taylor role. Instead, she played the sort of the lowly and poor and just shit upon character that she was in this movie, which I feel like she plays almost that a very similar role, but a little older in Lolita, if you guys have seen that.
Oh yeah, love Lolita. I mean the book Lolita is one of my favorite. I mean, it's not to use a word I kind of hate. It is problematic for whatever reasons, but it's like, man, it's funny. The book is one of the funniest fucking things I've ever read, and I remember really enjoying the film. Shelley Winters just always astounds me. She pops up in a lot of noir. I mean, there's a noir with Jack Palance that ends on a mountainside. The name is eluding me right now.
Big Knife?
I think that's it. I think that's it. Yeah, it's. I mean, she's great.
It mostly takes place in that
the cabin.
room. Yeah, because it was like kind of a play or something, right?
My grandma, not to make it personal, my grandma who was like in like San Jose in like the 40s and 50s. I Died 1,000 Times. That was the Jack Palance, Shelley Winters. Lee Marvin. My grandma really loved Shelley Winters, so we have like. I grew up like watching Poseidon Adventure. It was like whenever it was on, we'd watch it. She's great. Did you hear the story about how she showed up to the interview? The director didn't want to like give her the role because of, as you mentioned, her bombshell image. But she kind of came in dowdy clothes without an unflattering hairdo, and the director, he didn't even recognize her. And sort of like a Dustin Hoffman, how he got the Ratso Rizzo role, he like was like homeless in disguise when the director went to meet him, and he got the
right.
So she pulled one of those, which she's great. Yeah, I do think she oversells it a little bit in the boat, a little bit, and it's not even her. I think it's just the writing, because anytime someone starts, the whole wish upon a star that's one thing. But she starts saying, talking about the future the kids they're going to have. I mean, that's the cinematic death now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd even go back one line before that when she says, my husband's a great swimmer. No worries that we're going to go out here when they're not married yet. I'm like, you just fucked yourself, girl.
It is just so ham-fisted with the foreshadowing and then the mockery of him when he leaves his vacation to go on another vacation to murder her, double murder, right? He goes back to his vacation. They say to him, like, hey, you have a woman stashed away somewhere?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like, one of the girls is like... he's like, someone's, like, pushed off a dock, and she, like, screams, and he looks at that, and it bothers him. It's, like, it's so funny how they, like, deal with the repercussions. I mean, not funny. It has ripples, both before and after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought it was hilarious that the reason he got caught up in all of that was that Alice saw him partying in the paper.
Photo. How funny is that photo?
Yeah.
He's just having, it's like having if he just had like a leg around his neck, that would have been the only detail.
That was also hilarious when they were sitting at the tiki party that they had, or the Hawaiian party.
Oh yeah, because he actually does at one point. That's right. But
they all have lays on at the table there. Yeah.
That phone call has got to be one of the most like tense, horrifying. Like, I'm here now. I'm
in town. Where?
Horrifying. Yeah, but I mean, rightfully so. I mean, Jesus.
Sure.
Yeah.
How funny was it that, like, on their, whatever that was, second or third date with, Montgomery Clift and Shelley Winters, they come home, it starts raining, they like, oh, well, we'll just wait on the porch for a little bit and wait out this rain. Like, meanwhile, like, the top is down on the convertible, it's just like filling up with water. And then they go inside, and, the camera sort of modestly creeps over to the window to not see any sexual interactions, and then it
dissolved
dissolves to the morning.
Yeah,
and
he leaves,
and then he pieces out.
He goes down the stairs. Yeah,
but that shot in particular was stolen in Blood Simple. Again, the Coen brothers, like again, it was like two characters having an affair. The camera kind of moves over to the window. Outside the window is a car, and then like it dissolves to the morning, and the car's still there.
I didn't make that connection. I'm so glad that you made that connection. That is, when I first saw that, it freaked me out how brilliant. That sequence is just so, because you imagine the sex scene without everything that they do, it's your own scene. You imagine it for yourself. And that weird, haunting, kind of shitty song that's just kind of like a nothing, like jazz background song, but how it zooms in and then it goes to day and the car stays in the back. I love everything. Everything about that scene. And then, so the radio in that moment, then later it's a radio again on the dock.
Yes.
Oh, right.
As they take off.
Talking about the murder, right?
Talking about the murder. And it's on this floating dock with there's something about radios in this movie.
The way that they designed that sound. They had the boat kind of come around and drown out what the radio was saying at one point.
Yes.
And then it would come back in at the important parts, and it was really, really well done. I took a note of that, actually. It was great.
I'm so glad I didn't even notice that. See, like, I love that scene so much. It didn't occur to me. Yes, you're right. It does. It's amazing sound design. It's great editing. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well,
it's awesome.
There was this really interesting, just film form aspect to the movie where it's like during sort of that, first half, before the walls start closing in on Montgomery Clift, we spent a lot of time with, a camera just like stuck in a position, and characters kind of move in and out of like being closer to it and being further away from it. Like there's that example where he takes the call out in the hallway. The camera is left in his room and he's taking a call like further away, and like and he kind of comes back, it rings and he picks it up later. There's the shot where Shelley Winters is talking to him, and like she's sitting on one side of her dining room table, her back's the camera the entire time. Camera doesn't move. They're just kind of like moving around the room, but getting further away from the camera. And like the camera like stays really far away until the time where like things start getting claustrophobic or his lust goes into overdrive. Like we get that haunting close up of Elizabeth Taylor, hugging him on that porch that we kind of see.
Oh, I love
multiple
that scene.
times. And like, the parts where he gets that phone call at the luau you were talking about earlier, where it's like, just that sweaty, forehead, and he's like, what, where are you? And like, it's like, and then again on that boat too, where it's like tight close up of Shelley Winters, tight close up of Montgomery Clift, tight close up. But, until the walls start closing in on him, we are like staying pretty far away from what's going on with him.
Yeah.
Almost as if, we don't know what he's up to. We don't know what he's thinking with, who he's in love with or in lust with or whatever.
It's great that you picked that up. The noose closing in is a classic noir trope. As the story goes, and Coen brothers are really good at that too. The circumstances getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. This doing it also in proximity to the distance of the camera to the performer. The closing in space is a really interesting. Yeah, I'm really glad that you picked up on that, because I noticed that this time too, how it really is very tight at the end, and I love it. Yeah,
it's funny, like moments like that. I was like, okay, now I'm feeling the film noir some more. Like, I had heard of this movie, but I had heard of it in the context of it being sort of like an Academy Award, like an Oscar bait type, melodrama type film.
It looks much more boring than it is how I always thought about it. Yeah,
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
When I grabbed the DVD to rent it, I was like, is this the right one? Because I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same movie. But it's funny because there are so many like risque moments in the movie, like especially like if you remember Montgomery Clift, the reason he's on the phone is he's trying to find a doctor who's going to perform something that we can't say in 1951, and then Shelley Winters goes and sees some doctor that he looked up, and it's like they're having this abortion conversation without actually saying the word.
Oh, that scene's awful with the doctor. Yeah, that's heartbreaking with the doctor. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
And I love how the doctor's like, why don't you just go? I mean, they're free hospitals. Why don't you go deal with one of those? Like, wait, what? What country is this?
But do you remember the scene right after that when she tells Montgomery Clift about what the doctor had said in that car? It's pitch black. Like they don't you don't see their face at all,
and you see this like little slit for
just
her
like
eyes, like
here
exactly.
and here, like it's like just barely lit.
Right. It's like the Dracula.
Yes, exactly.
Like eye light on Shelley Winters.
That is a classic. The ping right on the eyes. It's a couple things about Place the Sun. One thing that I wonder, there's a part right after their night together where they're like standing next to each other, and the uncle comes by and he's basically sort of teasing a promotion. George said something kind of like some throwaway line about like I'll have that production report for you right away.
Right.
What the fuck does that production report possibly look like from this wandering kid who is a nephew who grew up in like this Uber? What is it? What is he writing? What is it?
Well, I mean, you do see him doing so he sits on the assembly line and then he like jots some stuff down in his notebook.
Like how to make it efficient.
I know what you're asking. Like, what could it possibly be? Fire more people and make a machine out of this stuff?
I might have salami sandwich today. Thursday's pastrami. Like, what could it possibly be? Is it
Miss Libby's car is green?
Yeah, it's details. It's useless. Yeah. But the idea that like he has this like nonsense report is just like, what could it? But also,
it's TPS.
It's his TPS report.
Gotta get those done.
He's got to get his TPS report in. The other thing that occurred to me is that if he followed the rules and didn't sleep with a coworker, everything would have worked out.
Yeah, we wouldn't have had a movie. Yeah,
he would have met Angela Vickers at the end of the summer, and then it just would have he would have probably fucked it up eventually, bungled.
So I wanted to bring that up. That's interesting, and I was questioning the same thing. Why did he choose the first girl that he saw? And I'm thinking, based on his background, that might be the first woman that he saw, like in his new free life, away from his religious family and all that.
Here's what I'm guessing: it's that because he goes to the movies. And he's very aggressive with her. And I think that he's like mimicking the way guys are in movies at the time. Very know. Like, yeah, he doesn't know. He might have had, that's a really good call. It probably is his first dalliance. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting reading. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was kind of what I was, because I had the same question. I was like,
what's funny? I really thought that while they were reenacting the boat in the courtroom,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's so weird.
I kept like waiting for that part that he tripped on the little like line
that
was like coiled up in the boat. I kept waiting for that to come back and like, oh, that's why he couldn't swim to help her or something. But it kind of didn't come back. I mean,
was it just a flub that they left in there?
Infer that was a piece of it, yeah, or was it a flub? Yeah, who knows?
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, is that going to come back And did he like jar something loose, or was that a mistake? And like the director was like, "Oh, this was a natural thing. We'll leave that in there because it like makes it look real."
I think it's that.
Yeah.
I just think it's such an odd visual, the boat and the courtroom. I just think, but to be honest, I think I've already said it. That courtroom trial portion kind of loses steam for me.
Well, it teaches you a valuable lesson. Just don't be honest on the stand. Like when he says, "Yeah, I wanted to kill her when I went out there, but then I decided not to."
Yeah.
Like, it would have helped the story just to like omit that little part.
You don't need to tell him everything. Try to keep something to yourself.
No, he doesn't have to say that. Doesn't have to say that at all.
No,
that's
not
also
at all.
like that's kind of like a classic like weird thing of noir detective fiction in general. Like there is often an ending where like the case is solved and someone like says, "I know what's really going on," and then someone confesses on the spot. They don't have to do that. They don't have to do that. Nobody at that moment. They can say, "I want a lawyer. I want to be in a court. I want a cop. I want."
Especially
They don't
now,
have to. It's like a private investigator, like some schlub. It's like, "I'm Philip Marlowe. You're great, but like I don't have to say shit in front of you." It's like so like that idea that it's like you're right and everything just spills out is such a funny cliche. But
right, they just get them all worked up. I mean, it happened in Postman too. It's like that's the reason John Garfield confessed.
Oh,
and it's
God.
like,
Yeah. And the worst metaphor, I love the title, but the worst metaphor, I'm sorry. It doesn't work for me. The whole,
It doesn't hold up at all, right? I mean, not even in the least, yeah.
No. The postman coming around,
It should have been called Final Destination because he didn't go down for the one murder, but he went down for the other murder. So it's like, karma gets him. Final karma, maybe?
Ooh. Final Karma.
Final Karma. It's like
Directed by Jeremy Floyd.
Straight to Redbox.
It's a retelling of The Postman by Jeremy Floyd.
Right.
I mean, it's a cool...
In Redbox.
It's a cool title, but it just is such a weak metaphor. I don't know, man.
Which is also like just like not addressed at all in the book. They at least tried to address it in the movie. Where he's like, yeah, well, the postman will come ringing for you the second time or something at the very end of speech there. But like in the book, it's just like, well, it's just the title. Deal with it.
I'd almost rather have that,
Yeah.
Just the ominous sounding. Place in the Sun's good. It almost sounds like a Douglas Sirk film, which I thought it was. I thought it was much more of that kind
exactly.
of,
like the poster art, all that stuff, like, and like the fact that it was like, Academy Award winning, whatever. I thought, okay, Douglas Sirk, right? It's going to be a straight melodrama. I want to make sure this is the right movie.
I'm so glad you guys got a chance to see it. I feel like
Totally.
both like over celebrated and under celebrated at the same time, if that's possible. Like it's like it's made a lot of the important lists, but then it's really not talked about as much. Parts of it haven't aged well, but then it's also very. I mean, Montgomery Clift is so. I love From Here to Eternity and The Misfits. His last movie is a really interesting movie called The Defector. If you ever have a chance, he plays a CIA agent in Germany. It's there's a scene where he's like poisoned in a hotel room, and so it's like tripping balls Monty Clift. It's a very weird movie. Yeah, check that movie out. Yeah.
What was it again?
The Defector. The Defector.
You were speaking of like very cool titles of movies, and I'd love to hear your impression of the title of Body Heat because it is so on the nose for this movie. But what do you think of this title?
Oh, it's perfect.
It couldn't be any more perfect. Even the main femme fatale, Maddie Walker, her body runs hotter than 100 degrees. She said this.
Right.
Literally, she's got body heat.
Something wrong with her engine.
Exactly.
Let me guess. You have the right tool to fix it?
This movie made me laugh more than I probably should have. Like I was pretty much laughing my ass off the whole time.
It's supposed to be funny though, so I think that's the correct reaction. Yeah,
it is so great, and you can tell like this is just Lawrence Kasdan kind of coming in there and being like, I watched all these films growing up, and I really love these old classic films. I'm gonna make this as current as I can, while still upping the ante with a lot of the sexual scenes and the sex in general, and like the somewhat nudity, like the strange, like just to the hip of William Hurt, like very close. We're getting close, we're not going to show everything, but it's really, really risque.
We're starting to see some hairs, and exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So real quick, going back to a comment you made earlier, Alex, about the music. So like the music was done by John Barry. And I was like, man, where have I heard that name? And
Is he the Bond guy?
He did the Bond music for the first, dozen movies.
He's the Bond guy, yeah.
And it is especially notable in the opening credit sequence where it's like we keep seeing this like silhouette of some hips and this naked woman, and it's like
I see where you're going.
A John Barry opening credit sequence.
That's
straight out of Bond.
That's very astute. I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great call.
Well, and I love how this movie, casting-wise, managed to get all these actors before they were kind of big stars. I mean, William Hurt, Kathleen Turner, even Ted Danson. This is before Cheers, right? I mean, this is like...
So it's before Creepshow, then? It was a year before Creepshow.
Really? Okay.
This was the movie to see, summer of 1981.
Mickey Rourke?
Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, Mickey Rourke. I wanted to bring up Mickey Rourke. He was great in this as the projectionist. Instead of the projectionist, he was the arsonist in this one, But what an interesting character. I mean, was he one of his previous clients? Is that why he knew him? Is that what Ned says?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, he got him off on something.
He got him off on arson charges or something, but the guy's still a bomb maker.
They did allude to that. Yeah, and exactly. Yeah. And he's super loyal to him and no questions asked.
So
because,
great. But he's like, man, you don't need to do what you're doing, man. You don't want to do what you're doing. Make sure you want to do it.
His intro where he's like mouthing along to like the rock and roll song. It's like so self-aware. It's like trying to shoehorn in like, this is the cool guy now. Yeah. It's very...
the badass.
Yeah, it's not very subtle. Yeah. And I actually thought this was like a weird bellwether or sort of canary in the coal mine of all the erotic thrillers to come in the 90s.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Cinemax was paying attention when they were watching this one.
Yeah, no, for real. I mean, this had such a... I mean, I don't know how direct that is, but it just seems like an influence, So many details. And that exchange earlier that you guys talked about, like finding the right tool, I think he even ends it with saying something like, that's really corny. So, like, it's so smart. Like, the characters are even aware to, like, avoid cliche. Because that line's hilarious. But then they, like, back away and they're like, okay, we're actually trying to, like, hit on each other here.
How great was the end of that scene where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to leave. You leave a little bit later. It's like, well, is anybody going to believe that? Right? Like, we've been sitting here talking and getting along so long. And she's like, okay, great. And then she, like, slaps him across the face.
Yeah.
Did she have him cased out before they ever meet, or after?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what that scene was, where he runs into that guy. He's like,
the guy that sued him once.
Yeah, exactly. You sued me, and fuck you. Get out of here. And he's like, well, I tried to send you some business.
I wanted to make up for things, so I sent you this great woman.
But I guess what I'm asking is because he meets her at the boardwalk fair sort of situation. But she just stands up in the crowd and then walks out, and then he follows her. So I'm thinking, like, did she maybe do that after that first encounter?
Or she did it like 3 or 4 times, and he didn't notice her, and then, like, that was the one that he noticed.
Totally.
That's when you go beyond the page of the script. She's been trying that for hours.
Right.
Yeah, no, I love this film so much.
Well, I think the casting too. I thought Richard Crenna, I believe his name is, was amazing in this. Especially when he called Kathleen Turner's ex a Dorcas.
You'd never believe the Dorcas she was with when I met her.
I hadn't heard the word Dorcas probably since 1981.
Yeah,
very sincere.
It's like a kid called you that.
Exactly. When Chrissy was watching that with me, she's like, "Did he just say Dorcas? I used to call my friends Dorcas."
That's great. That's great.
I guess it was this movie that sort of again quoted Red Wind, the Raymond Chandler story, and I think it was when Ted Danson and William Hurt and the judge from A Few Good Men are all sitting around in that little that diner, and the cop friend has a Red Wind speech like, oh yeah, pretty much anything's possible. Like, yeah, if the heat doesn't let up, everyone's going to start killing each other or whatever.
No, those diner scenes, I love how overblown those diner scenes are.
Yeah.
And it's so...
Are you talking about the photography? Or?
Oh, the photography. Just like, it's so backlit naturally. They're like, it's not how it would occur to light a scene like that, because it's so overblown in the back with this natural white light, which is a bit like being someplace like Florida, or if you don't have your sunglasses, you know, like if you're like squinting all the time when like the light's bouncing off like white pavement or like slight salmon colored pavement, like that. I mean, parts of LA too, you know, it's like if you don't have your sunglasses, you're fucked. So it's like, I love those diner scenes because it really does, like, it's so not how you see restaurant conversation scenes filmed, and it is a reminder of just how fucking miserable hot it is, because it's kind of miserable to look at, to be honest, and it has a little bit of that 80s Vaseline touch,
I want to agree with you, and the most uncomfortable thing to look at on screen was watching William Hurt jog for what looks like 10 miles and then start smoking cigarettes.
More than once.
Calm down, man. Can you just get and he can't even catch his breath, and he's trying to inhale a cigarette. I'm like, are you insane?
I used to like get up at 5 a.m. to go play soccer in South Pasadena, and you'd get there, you have to like sign up on a sheet and everything. It was a full field, 11 on 11. It was like, you know, this insane thing, and they do a short match, so it wasn't like, you know, an hour and a half or whatever. But like these guys, I was like the only white guy there, and it was all Thai players, and they would all like get off the field after running in the entire length of the field and just all start smoking. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
No way.
How are you doing this?
Dude, yeah.
I'm completely winded.
I mean, you know what? I watch a lot of these film noir films, and I'm like, I want a cigarette. Sometimes the guys look so cool smoking cigarettes, you know. In this one, it made me like vomit. I was like, I can't even watch this.
I think Ted Danson even has a line. He's like, I'll just breathe the air. You know?
Exactly. He's the one that doesn't smoke, But I think that's the cigar scene, right? That's the dissertation? Yeah.
Right,
yeah, that seems
they're going over the probate or
Did I call it a dissertation? That's not what they're called.
Yeah.
Deposition.
Deposition. And you know what's so funny? I think that was he knows exactly what she's up to with her performance, because after she pretends to learn that she's inheriting everything, the focus goes to him. And I feel like he's like watching her. And at the very end of the scene, he like turns away towards the camera. So I feel like in knowing her past, you know, having to warn his friend, he knows that she's faking, performing, learning that she would get everything. He's the only one in the room that knows
Which
that.
like starts to put his antenna up or whatever, like finally, after all this, like, you know, finally, like, hey, maybe not everything she says is true, right? It's like...
Ted Danson was telling him throughout the entire movie, as well as the detective friend of theirs, was telling him the whole time, stay the hell away from that woman, and he just couldn't do it because he was so wrapped up in that lust thing.
Totally. She had her hooks deep inside him.
They're all kind of naive. And that's one of the things about noir, is you get in over your head. All noir is about people just getting in over their head. And sometimes they're kind of dumb. And William Hurt in this film is he's kind of thick, you know? One thing I love is that right after the murder happens, everything is shrouded in fog. You know, it's very minor, and it's almost a little bit on the nose in terms of like film school symbolism. But like, man, I love it. And it was almost Christopher Reeve. William Hurt was almost Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, he turned it down though. I think he didn't want to. He didn't feel himself to be a sexy person like William Hurt is, I guess.
That's a funny sentence said out loud.
I wanted to talk about the ending real quick. So there was a body that is found in the exploded building, correct? Mm-hmm. Was it the friend?
She killed her friend. I think she killed her friend.
The Marianne Simpson.
She did kill her friend.
Like the one who's like, hey, you want to fuck? And it's like, oh, wait, sorry, wrong person.
Sorry.
So when Ted Danson, or I forget who it is at the end, confirms with him that the remains were certified to be hers, and in the yearbook, he learns that her friend was actually named Maddie.
The names were transposed.
Yeah, so that Maddie actually did die, but that's not
so
the Maddie.
So fucked up, right? Like,
so in the darkness, she must have set it up, and that's also why when Mickey Rourke, it was this time when he mentions She asked me about doing it with a delay. I'm like, oh, the delay. That's how she got away. It's like, it's so minor, but like it's that movie thing because they mentioned
I didn't catch that either. That's a great call.
She asked about building a bomb for a door with a delay. So she does something in the silhouette to get her friend, I think, to open up. And then that's why at the end she pulls the great ending. I mean, there's a great other noir, Purple Noon, which became Talented Mr. Ripley. Ends in a very similar way with a slight twist of like an exotic location and someone somewhere new. I thought she was great.
That was my next question though, because he sees the yearbook, right? And in her ambition it says to live rich in an exotic land, right? That's her ambition as a high schooler.
Like to get rich and live in an exotic land or something like that, yeah.
And she does, right? Because she's with some guy that's clearly speaking Portuguese or something. I don't know. She must be in, I guess, Brazil or somewhere. I don't know where she is. But do you think she's doing this all over again? Or is she done and enjoying her?
It was like she got everything she wanted, including her high school yearbook ambition. And she's fucking miserable.
Right. Okay. That's okay. Great. She's not happy where she is still.
And speaking of suckers, like it was so interesting. Like you're bringing that up earlier, and it's like, yeah, there is sort of like you have to be a sucker to get kind of roped into. It's the old expression, you can't cheat an honest man, right? It's like every film noir protagonist who gets in over his head is always like a sucker like this, right? But like, the idea here is so interesting because it's like, Kathleen Turner couldn't manipulate Richard Crenna the way that she could William Hurt because, Richard Crenna is more evil than she is. And like, he's not a sucker. It's like she had to find the guy to do her bidding, right?
Because they wouldn't even say what Richard Crenna did for a living, right? It was just a bunch of investments and real estate and whatever.
There's a lot of finance, a lot of shady, a lot of like business dealings, like a lot of payola, real estate.
But it's funny, previously Brian bringing up her yearbook line makes me think that maybe her going to Florida and doing this was the first draft. Because from Illinois, Florida kind of is like not exotic, but like
that's a great point.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
It's like maybe she's like thinking that that's her doing it actually. Like
so next she needs to go to fucking Saturn. Like what's the next bigger thing than some exotic beach? Like
exactly. Yeah. Or maybe it's just like a cyclical.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Maybe she was doing this again, and maybe she was gonna just keep globe-trotting as this con artist.
Yeah, it's like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yeah,
that's a really funny idea. It spins off into her just going from like place to place.
Body Heat 2, globetrotting. Yeah.
I spent all the money. I need some more.
They would call it Too Hot or something like that, like Body Heat Too Hot.
Still heating.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But like that's funny. Okay, so when I first saw this movie, I thought the ending was that she got everything she wanted. Except she didn't mean to fall in love along the way, and she's now sort of regretting that, and everything else is a poor imitation of the way that William Hurt made her feel. Mm-hmm. Another way to read it, I think, and the way I kind of saw it this time was not so much that maybe it was William Hurt that she was missing, but just that like, she got everything she wanted, and it's like
still not enough.
Still not enough. It's like that it doesn't fill the void. Mm-hmm. Inside her type of thing, and like
because that's the whole rush, right? She can manipulate, she can play people, like that's the rush.
It's the way I always thought about the Odyssey. As soon as he returns and slays all the suitors, and like having gone through this whole thing, it's like is he gonna be satisfied to stay home and just hang out and put his feet up and eat grapes and shit? Like no, the like for him. Like the action is the juice, right? It's like, and same with her. It's like maybe that's part of it too. It's like that playing those games and like setting up the extremely long con and manipulating her way through things. Like that was what sort of gave her meaning or whatever. And like as soon as it was over, it was all successful and great. But like, what's left for her?
That's kind of where I was going with it. I thought this was just one stop. William Hurt was one stop on her. manipulation stops across whatever else man or male she could take over. She could probably do it to females too. Who knows? But she was I think she was into that chase or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Jeremy, if there is an Odyssey connection, I did think that the chimes were like sirens.
Yes. And especially because when he first left, like she kissed him on the porch, he started to walk away, and then here's the chimes.
He sees them. There's a shot just of the balcony and chimes, and then he's like, I gotta get back in there. Fucking breaks it with the fucking hose thing. Like, the chimes are the sirens. And then they show up later. They're very ominous at the end as he's like confronting her at the end, Yeah.
But there are times when the chimes aren't ringing. Like it's perfectly still. There is no wind. I think that might have been something.
The weather, the geography.
Exactly.
The fractured landscape of that part of Florida, just like the bridges and the sort of things are sort of split. And it's also small town and the class divisions. It's perfect for noir. I mean, it becomes micro macro for the characters, Yeah. It becomes very complex.
I mean, I feel like we did kind of tie all these things together pretty well, but I think another like connection I thought about last night after finishing the movie was that there was that moment where Kathleen Turner perhaps disingenuously threatened suicide, but it felt a lot like Shelley Winters in A Place in the Sun, Yeah.
Yes, she does say that, and it really is like. Whoa.
Wait, doesn't Lana Turner do that too? Doesn't she do that in Postman? Doesn't she hold onto the knife at one point when she's talking about...
Actually, I think you're right. That does ring a bell.
Talking about killing Nick with the knife.
No. That knife was for me, Frank.
Oh, right.
It's when Shelley Winters threatens to kill herself, it's pretty awful. It's one of the things that she one of the last ditch attempts that she can possibly use against him.
Right. And she just has this heart-wrenching patheticness to her voice, and she's able to do that in multiple performances. I mean, she does it again in Lolita too, but to have that pull on the audience's heartstrings but not the protagonist's heartstrings, totally unmoved by it.
Right.
Anyway.
You're absolutely right. Last thing about Body Heat, the mustache. It sets it, I think, apart from the 40s and the 50s films, is the leading man with the mustache. Very 1980s.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, results of the 70s. I mean, a lot of those early 80s films are really in production in the late 70s, so they're sort of
This movie, it's okay, it is, yes, it's technically the 80s, but man, it still feels like the 70s. When you're looking
totally.
at it,
Yeah, that's kind of, there's always in the beginning or end of a decade, there's always a weird overlap between the styles,
Right.
Early 90s films still feel like 80s films sometimes,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just really quickly wanted to shout out Naked City if people really like summer noirs. Naked City is a great one, became a TV show. Purple Noon, which has a similar ending to Body Heat. It's an Alain Delon film, French in color. And The Window, which you guys, I think, might be covering, or...
we were talking about that. That almost made the cut on this one.
Sad story with the child actor. If you have a time for a Wikipedia wormhole, the child actor of The Window, who is also a Disney child star, it's pretty heartbreaking, but pretty good movie. Yeah.
Well, maybe have to come up with another block using that one. But yeah, it was one of our earlier episodes was a movie that was a remake of The Window.
Oh, that's what it was.
So I thought it'd be fun to do.
Was that Cloak and Dagger?
Cloak and Dagger.
Cloak and Dagger. Exactly. Clash by Night, Key Largo, Ace in the Hole. Split Second, which is never talked about, Out in the Desert, and Breaking Point. We talked about John Garfield tonight. Breaking Point is another really good summer noir. Purple Noon mentioned. Jeopardy with Barbara Stanwyck. Stray Dog. Touch of Evil is technically summer noir. And last but not least, Rear Fucking Window is a summer noir. I mean, because it's Heat Wave,
Right.
We just talked about Stray Dog. That was definitely a summer noir. You could feel the heat coming off of that movie.
I love that film.
It's amazing.
It's great that you guys covered that. He did like that film apparently. Not one of his favorites of his own.
Kurosawa?
Yeah, he wasn't happy with it. Yeah, which is so weird.
Well, it sounds like we've got I don't know, 4 more years of summer noir with you after that list. So looking forward to it.
Thank you guys so much for having me back on. It's,
Thanks for
really
coming
a pleasure
back.
being here.
Where can people follow you again?
OnlyFilmNoir, yeah. OnlyFilmNoir is where I'm at online. I sometimes curate it to the month, but usually it's just what I'm watching, sometimes neo-noir, trying to do more international, and that's where I am. My name's Alex. Thanks for having me on, Jeremy and Brian. Really, I love you guys' podcast. It's just really great to be back.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. And thanks for coming back. It was great.
I had a great time.
Next week, we will be talking about 3 movies. This is a very interesting topic. It almost took us a while to figure out the wording for it. But these are 3 movies that represent movies that have a song in them that outlives the memory or the popularity of the movie. How did I do, Jeremy?
Pretty good. I think we'll have to find a way to distill that real quick into a title, but I mean, that's the idea.
The 3 movies we're watching are New York, New York, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, and Unchained.
Exactly.
Unchained, is that the Ghost song?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It came from a prison movie in the 50s, I believe.
I love that. That's really, really interesting.
This is a very interesting topic.
Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Of course, we get
Raindrops.
The famous Bob Dylan song "Knocking on Heaven's Door."
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
And,
I'm thinking of a different movie. Okay.
New York, New York, which you'll never guess which song that was.
Chicago?
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
The wind chimes on my porch. They keep ringing, and I go out there expecting a cool breeze, but not this year. This year, it's just hot air.